What if everything you know about death were a lie? Imagine an ancient hidden text, a guide that maps out, in impressive detail, the exact moment when you take your last breath. This is no ordinary book. It is a key to uncovering what happens after death, guiding us through this transitional journey with surprising precision. Losing even a single moment of this journey could mean losing yourself forever, trapped in an endless cycle. Today, you are about to access the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a sacred manuscript with over 1,000 years of history. Written to guide us to the edge of existence and back, this text has the power to transform both the way we live and how we perceive death and life after it. Despite all the scientific and technological advancements, the fundamental question remains: what happens after death? The answer, surprisingly, is not in our laboratories, but in ancient spiritual teachings. The Tibetan Book of the Dead boldly confronts this question, attracting the interest of monks, mystics, philosophers, and scientists throughout the centuries. Its central assertion is deeply revolutionary. Consciousness does not cease with the death of the physical body. Instead, it embarks on a journey through invisible realms where each stage of this journey presents immense possibilities for liberation or rebirth. What's most fascinating is how these descriptions resonate with modern near-death experiences, bright lights, spiritual beings, and an inexplicable peace. Coincidence or confirmation of a universal truth? Studying this text is like exploring a map to the nature of reality, consciousness, and existence. More than just a manual for death, it is an invitation for the living. The Tibetan Book of the Dead challenges us to recognize that life is fleeting and that a full awareness of our finitude allows us to live with more purpose, clarity, and compassion. Its true power lies in teaching us how to live fully, awakening us to the reality of the present moment. I invite you to keep an open mind as we explore this spiritual legacy. Let's discover the origins of this knowledge and the visionary figure behind it. Are you ready to dive into this ancient wisdom? Let's begin. At the core of this transcendent teaching is the concept of Bardo, a word that in the context of Tibetan Buddhism redefines our view of existence. Much more than the interval between death and rebirth, Bardo represents any state of transition, a moment when the known dissolves and the familiar disappears, leaving us in a space of uncertainty and potential. How many times have you felt on the edge between what was and what is yet to come? These periods of change, where reality seems to disintegrate to recreate itself, are bardos. They are opportunities for profound transformation, renewal, and transcendence. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, also known as the Bardo Thodol, teaches us that death is only one of several phases of transition. More than that, it reveals that there are three main bardos, each representing an essential stage of human consciousness and the process of inner transformation. Understanding these stages not only illuminates what happens after death, but also offers a guide for navigating the transitions of life with wisdom and clarity. First, we are introduced to the Chikai Bardo, the moment of death itself. But contrary to the common view that death represents the end of everything, the Chikai Bardo reveals a radically different perspective. Death is, in fact, a portal, a point of transition to a more pure and revealing form of consciousness. At this stage, we are not simply leaving the physical body behind. What truly happens is that our consciousness loosens from the limitations of the ego and materiality, shedding the layers of illusion we have built throughout our lives. Imagine then a blinding flash of pure consciousness, a moment of absolute clarity where everything that was once obscure or hidden emerges with stunning sharpness. It's as if finally everything that seemed confused or fragmented unites into a single integrated perception. The deepest truths of existence, those that transcend conventional understanding, are revealed. The meaning of life, death, and the universe no longer hides behind a veil of uncertainty. At this moment of Chikai Bardo, consciousness is free from any form of filtering. There is no longer space for deception or distractions. In this state, the barriers between the individual and the universe dissolve. What we experience is a fusion with the whole, a union with ultimate reality, where time and space no longer exist in the way we understand them. Death, then, is not an end, but a passage to an expansion of consciousness, revealing what is eternal and unchanging within us, beyond the illusions of the physical body. It is important to note that according to Tibetan teachings, how we experience this initial bardo can be deeply influenced by the way we have lived our lives. If we are attached to desires, fears, or attachments, these feelings can distort our perception in this moment of transcendence. On the other hand, those who have cultivated a calm and open mind through spiritual practice may access full awareness and understanding in this crucial moment. The central revelation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is profoundly revolutionary. The experience of the clear light of consciousness, that pure, infinite, and transcendent state is not exclusive to the moment of death. It is within our reach, here and now, embedded in the small intervals between one thought and another, in the transitions of the mind and in the pauses of everyday life. This light is not something distant or mysterious. It is the fundamental essence of our own nature, always present but often obscured by the distractions of worldly existence. Think of the clear light as the backdrop of consciousness, the infinite space where all experiences occur. It is that fleeting moment between sleep and wakefulness where you perceive something beyond time and space. It is the unexpected clarity that arises in the midst of chaos, like a moment of complete connection with the present, when everything seems to make sense. These glimpses of the clear light are little bardos in themselves, doorways that open to a deeper perception, even if for a brief moment. What the Bardo Thodol teaches us is that these moments should not be ignored. They are precious opportunities to touch the essential nature of reality. At the moment of death, this clear light appears in its purest and most intense form, like a flash of absolute truth. It is the essence of who we are beyond the body, beyond the ego, beyond all the stories we tell ourselves. But here's the paradox: even though it is our true nature, many of us do not recognize it. When this crucial moment arrives, the mind may react with fear, confusion, or attachment to the known. Instead of embracing the light, we shrink from it, pushing ourselves back into the cycle of rebirth. This inability to recognize the light as our own essence is perhaps the greatest tragedy of existence. Now imagine what it would mean to be prepared for this supreme moment, not just to face it without fear, but to recognize it as an opportunity for ultimate liberation. Tibetan teachings affirm that enlightenment is possible in a single instant, at the exact moment the clear light appears. But this window of opportunity is incredibly brief. Those who have not trained their minds to recognize the light may lose it as quickly as it arises, like trying to hold water with their hands. And here is the deepest wisdom. Preparation for this moment does not begin at death. It begins in life. Tibetan masters teach that it is through consistent spiritual practice, such as meditation, mindfulness, and self-inquiry, that we can become familiar with the clear light. Deep meditation, in particular, is seen as a tool to access states of consciousness where this light can be glimpsed. Each moment of meditation is like a rehearsal for the final moment, a chance to train the mind to remain present in the face of absolute truth. These glimpses of the clear light in life are not just preparatory, they are transformative. They show us that life, like death, is an ongoing process of transition. Every moment contains the seed of enlightenment, and each moment of full presence brings us closer to this fundamental truth. By cultivating this awareness, we are not only preparing for the moment of death, but also learning to live with more clarity, purpose, and compassion. For Tibetans, training for death is, in fact, training for life. Recognizing the clear light, even for an instant, can profoundly change our perspective. Imagine living with the awareness that every moment is a microcosm of the infinite, an opportunity to touch the deepest truth of who we are. This shift in perception frees us from the fear of death because we realize that the clear light is not something we lose or gain. It is the eternal essence of all that we are. When the Bardo Thodol speaks of the clear light, it is not merely describing a phenomenon that occurs at death. It is pointing to the possibility of transformation here and now. Each moment of mindfulness, every effort to look beyond the ego, each instant of connection with the present is a step toward recognizing this light. And in the end, it is not just about attaining liberation at the moment of death, but living an illuminated life where the clear light of consciousness shines through every action, thought, and experience. Thus, the true challenge is not waiting for death to find the light, but recognizing it in every moment of existence. The second stage, Chikai Bardo, or the Bardo of Visions, represents a phase where consciousness immerses itself in a vast and multifaceted universe of perceptions. After the transitional moment of Chikai Bardo, in which consciousness frees itself from the constraints of the physical body, it enters a space where the world of forms and illusions becomes tangible. Here, the visions are not merely external manifestations. They are profound reflections of the internal state of consciousness, revealing the complexities and dilemmas of the human psyche. Imagine being in a state where everything around you becomes fluid, mutable, and permeable. In an instant, you find yourself immersed in impressive visions, scenes of sublime peace and harmony, but also of chaos and terror. These visions are not isolated, nor are they merely arbitrary. They arise as manifestations of the mind itself, projecting outward, becoming visible to the observer. Each image, each scene, whether angelic or demonic, carries a deep meaning, a reflection of the unresolved emotions, desires, fears, and longings that have shaped our life. In Chikai Bardo, the central concept is the interaction between the mind and the forms it projects. The visions are not external forces or entities emerging from outside, but rather the externalization of the internal dynamics of consciousness. What we see and experience in this state is a mirror of the deepest layers of our psyche, a space where objective reality dissolves and subjectivity becomes the only tangible reality. The visions may be peaceful, representing the purity, enlightenment, and harmony of the mind when it is free from disturbances. However, these same visions can transform, becoming terrifying and disturbing if consciousness encounters the darker, repressed aspects of itself. What is crucial to understand here is that these visions are neither inherently good nor bad. They are reflections of our own inner being. If faced with fear or aversion, these images can imprison us in cycles of suffering and confusion. On the other hand, if approached with acceptance and understanding, they can transform into portals of wisdom and liberation, allowing consciousness to move through the various realms of experience without being dominated by them. Chikai Bardo challenges us to look at the visions that arise not as something coming from the outside, but as an invitation to look within, to confront what is still unresolved, the traumas, illusions, and repetitive patterns that bind us. Furthermore, in Chikai Bardo, the visions can also be seen as a form of teaching. Just as in many spiritual traditions, the process of seeing and integrating the shadows of our mind is a fundamental step on the path to enlightenment. In this sense, the Bardo of Visions is an opportunity for consciousness to expand its perception, to learn to distinguish reality from illusion, and ultimately to reach a higher level of clarity and self-understanding. This Bardo reminds us that true spiritual transformation does not occur in a world outside of us, but in the depths of our own mind. What we see, what we feel, and what we experience is a reflection of who we are at any given moment. Here, Tibetan philosophy connects with modern psychology, especially with the concepts of Carl Jung. Jung described these forces as universal archetypes, figures that reside in our collective unconscious. The peaceful gods represent the enlightened self, while the wrathful demons symbolize the shadows we avoid integrating. For Jung, the process of individuation, or the path to psychic wholeness, requires us to confront these internal forces, transcending duality and accepting that light and shadow are interdependent aspects of who we are. In the second Bardo, you are not just faced with visions, you are confronted with the essence of your being. Each encounter is an opportunity for transcendence, but only if you can recognize these experiences as creations of your mind. The key is consciousness, a presence that allows you to see these projections without fear or attachment. Recognizing that the demons that terrify you are merely reflections of your fear dissolves their power. Realizing that the peaceful figures are expressions of your potential awakens your wisdom. Those who fail to recognize this truth remain trapped in cycles of illusion. The wrathful figures become real threats, and the mind, unable to bear the intensity of the experience, retreats, plunging deeper into karmic patterns that perpetuate suffering. It's like being in a nightmare from which you cannot awaken, where the shadows you created take control. And here is the deepest truth. The experiences of the second Bardo are not confined to the afterlife. They happen every day in the transitions and challenges of daily life. Every time we are confronted by a fear we hesitate to face, every time an intense emotion takes over us, we are living a reflection of the second Bardo. Recognizing this gives us the chance to work with these forces here and now, preparing ourselves for the moment when these experiences intensify at the threshold of death. Thus, the journey through the second Bardo is more than a confrontation with the self. It is an opportunity for transcendence, integration, and liberation. It challenges us to abandon the separation between light and shadow, peaceful and wrathful, self and other. Because in the end, all of these figures, divine or monstrous, are expressions of the same consciousness, echoes of who we are in our entirety. The question remains, are you ready to face the divine mirror? The Chikai Bardo, or the Bardo of Rebirth, represents the final stage of the journey in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a pivotal moment of transition where the consciousness, now freed from the physical body, stands on the threshold of a new incarnation. This is the intersection between what we were and what we will become, where the desires, intentions, and energies accumulated throughout our lives begin to shape the essence of the reality we will experience in our next cycle of existence. However, the nature of this Bardo goes beyond a simple life change. It is a deep reflection on how our consciousness continually reinvents itself and the role the ego, desires, and projections play in that process. At this stage, the consciousness is no longer limited by physical form, but still maintains a deep connection to the psychological and spiritual traits acquired during the past life. Just as in the dying process, where the layers of physical and mental existence dissolve, in the Chikai Bardo we are in a state of pure potentiality. It is as if we are in a kind of cosmic vacuum, where everything we are and everything we seek exists in an unmanifested state of potential, waiting for the moment when we move toward a new cycle of existence. What defines the Chikai Bardo is that, in this state, mind and karma are the central forces that determine the immediate future of the consciousness. The unresolved impressions of the past life, desires, attachments, fears, and even spiritual aspirations begin to form the fertile ground for what is to come. The decisions made in this state are not consciously controlled, but are amplified by everything we have experienced and internalized. This is why many spiritual teachings emphasize the importance of living a mindful life, as the impressions left by our experiences shape the quality of our next existence. The desire for rebirth, often unconscious, becomes the fertile field from which our new life experience will arise. However, in the Chikai Bardo, there is also an element of choice. Just as consciousness is shaped by its desires, it also has the ability to transcend these desires if it is sufficiently enlightened. This is where the true depth of the Chikai Bardo emerges. Consciousness is not doomed to repeat patterns of suffering and illusion. It has the opportunity to free itself from the cycle of rebirth, the wheel of samsara, by understanding the fundamental nature of reality and transcending the projections of the ego. For those who awaken to this truth, the process of rebirth is no longer a repetitive cycle of suffering and desire, but an opportunity for spiritual renewal, where each rebirth can be seen as a chance to attain enlightenment, purify karma, and break free from the limitations of material existence. This transition can also be seen as a powerful metaphor for the process of inner transformation that occurs at every stage of life. The Chikai Bardo reminds us that change does not happen passively, it is shaped by our conscious choices. Rebirth, therefore, is not just a matter of a new life, but of how we continuously choose to renew ourselves, how our perception of ourselves is a creative principle. It is not a punitive or rewarding force imposed externally, but rather an expression of who you are at your core. Every action, no matter how small, carries a vibration that shapes the structure of reality. In the Bardo of rebirth, these vibrations become the foundations of your next existence. Imagine your choices in life as seeds planted in the fertile soil of the mind. Some seeds germinate quickly while others remain dormant, waiting for the right moment to grow. At the moment of rebirth, the soil is stirred and the seeds begin to sprout. The flowers that emerge or the weeds are not determined by an external agent, but by what you have planted and cultivated. At this stage, the mind confronts a whirlwind of visions, breathtaking landscapes, human and non-human forms, sounds and lights of unimaginable intensity. Each vision reflects an emotional or karmic state. If you have cultivated kindness and wisdom, you will be drawn to visions of clarity and beauty. If fears and attachments have dominated your life, you will encounter dark and chaotic scenes. These visions, however, are not merely passive scenes. They are portals charged with magnetic energy. Each portal resonates with your inner frequency, like a tuning fork that draws the soul into the next stage of its journey. And here lies the philosophical question: who truly chooses? Are you a conscious agent in this process, or a passenger carried by the currents of accumulated karma? While karma acts as a determining force, there is still a thread of freedom at this stage. For those who can maintain a calm and detached awareness, there is an opportunity to transcend the cycle. Recognizing each vision as a projection of the mind itself is the key to avoiding identification and thus escaping the gravitational pull that attracts you to rebirth. This clarity is the pinnacle of spiritual practice, to see the world not as something external to you, but as an expression of your own mind. The Bardo of rebirth reflects the raw truth about the interconnection of our lives. Each past life shapes the next, not only through our external actions, but also through the internal states we cultivate. The anger we fail to resolve, the love we don't express, the wisdom we ignore, all of these form the backdrop for our future. Rebirth, therefore, is not just a spiritual event. It is an existential reminder that life is a continuous flow of creation and reflection. If karma is the creative force shaping rebirth, it leads us to a fundamental question: how do we live now? Every moment is an opportunity to plant seeds for a higher existence. When we act with compassion, patience, and clarity, we are, in fact, building not only this life, but also the foundation of future lives. On the other hand, actions guided by ignorance, fear, or attachment perpetuate cycles of suffering. Modern philosophers and psychologists such as Carl Jung have drawn parallels between karma and the archetypes of the collective unconscious. Jung argued that the human soul is in constant dialogue with internal forces, desires, fears, and aspirations, which, if not integrated, manifest as repetitive patterns in our lives. In this context, the bardo of rebirth can be seen as a metaphor for the continuous cycle of projection and integration of the psyche. The bardo of rebirth is not just a spiritual stage, it is a cosmic dance between freedom and conditioning, creation and reflection. It invites us to look at life and beyond it as a field of infinite possibilities where every choice resonates throughout eternity. So, when contemplating karma and rebirth, the question arises: are you living in a way that shapes a future of clarity and enlightenment, or are you lost in the currents of attachment and ignorance? The answer lies not just in the afterlife, but in the present moment. Imagine your life as a training ground for the most important journey you will ever undertake: the transition beyond this existence. In Tibetan Buddhism, living and dying are inseparable, two aspects of the same cosmic dance. Every moment, every thought, every action is an opportunity to shape not only this life but also the next. And it is here that Tibetan teachings become more than just a spiritual practice. They are a philosophy of transformation, a bridge between the now and eternity. If you are trapped in cycles of fear, anger, or attachment, how can you break these chains? Tibetan Buddhism teaches us that liberation does not come from mere good intentions, but from a profound understanding of the mind. The practice of mindfulness and meditation is like holding a mirror in front of yourself, revealing the root causes of your actions. This self-analysis is not judgment, but clarity. The more you understand your motivations, the less power they have over you. The human mind is like a river. When left to drift, it can be turbulent, carrying debris of unconscious thoughts and emotions. But with practice and intention, that river can become a serene and focused stream, reflecting the light of consciousness. And it is this clarity that, according to Tibetan teachings, can guide you in the most critical moments, including the transition of death. Karma, often misunderstood as punishment or reward, is in fact a natural law, a reflection of the actions of the mind projected into the fabric of reality. In Tibetan Buddhism, life is seen as a space to cultivate positive karma, not only through good actions, but by transforming the intentions and emotions that give rise to them. Every moment of awareness is like throwing a stone into a lake. The waves that form do not disappear, they travel, interacting with other waves and shaping the surface of the lake. This is karma. Conscious actions create harmonious waves that reverberate through all existences. On the other hand, unconscious actions generate chaos, perpetuating cycles of suffering. The choice is always yours. Tibetan practice suggests that life is a constant preparation for death, not as a feared end, but as an opportunity for transcendence. Imagine living each day with the awareness that impermanence is an inevitable reality. This perspective does not lead to despair, but to appreciation. When you understand that each moment is unique, you begin to live it with greater intention. A central practice in Tibetan Buddhism is the meditation on impermanence. It is not merely about contemplating that everything passes, but using this perception to transform your relationship with time and attachment. Impermanence, when accepted, becomes a liberating force. It teaches that the now is all you truly possess, and within it lies the seed of all transformation. At the moment of death, Tibetan Buddhists practice the transfer of consciousness, directing the mind like an arrow toward enlightenment. This practice requires a life of training, as it demands clarity and detachment. Phowa serves as a reminder that death is not the end, but a transition, and that consciousness can be guided beyond the limitations of the body. Another powerful practice is Tonglen, or giving and receiving. Imagine inhaling the suffering of the world and exhaling love and healing. This technique dissolves egocentrism and strengthens compassion, becoming an antidote to fear and attachment. In the context of the Bardos, a heart trained in compassion can transform even the most terrifying visions into opportunities for growth. Tibetan mantras, such as the famous Om Mani Padme Hum, are vibrations that align the mind with elevated states of consciousness. Repeated with intention, they not only calm the mind but also train consciousness to navigate the challenges of life and death with fearlessness. Each mantra recited is like tuning the mind to a higher frequency, connecting it to the universal rhythm. One of the deepest lessons of Tibetan Buddhism is the interconnectedness of all things. Every thought you have, every action you take affects not only you but the whole. By cultivating clarity and compassion, you are not only freeing yourself, you are contributing to the balance of the universe. This philosophical view is reflected in every Tibetan practice. Tonglen, for example, teaches that the separation between you and others is an illusion. By breathing in the suffering of the world, you dissolve that barrier, realizing that all beings share the same essence. In this way, life ceases to be an isolated struggle and becomes a collective dance of learning and growth. This Tibetan wisdom is not limited to the moment of death. It is a call to live consciously, cultivating mindfulness, acceptance, and courage in the face of life's inevitable changes. Every loss, every transition is seen as a bardo, a transitional state that, though challenging, brings the possibility of rebirth. We are not only preparing to die well, we are learning to live with intention and depth. Modern science is also beginning to explore these ideas. Research on states of consciousness, near-death experiences, and meditative practices suggest that the mind can indeed transcend physical limitations. What does this mean for the way we live? If consciousness is continuous, if death is not the end, how should this impact our priorities, choices, and interactions? The most radical teaching of the Bardo Thodol is this: death is not the end, but a mirror reflecting the depth of our own consciousness. It is a unique opportunity to awaken to the true nature of reality, a moment when we can transcend the illusion of the ego and experience ultimate freedom. The essential question these teachings leave us with is, how can we integrate this wisdom into our lives today? How can we live so fully that death is not an event to be feared, but a natural transition embraced with acceptance and clarity? As we contemplate these questions, we realize that the true goal is not merely to die consciously, but to live in such a way that each moment is an expression of presence, love, and courage. Are you ready to embrace this journey? Are you ready to see life and death as parts of an inseparable whole, a dance between the finite and the infinite? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share how you think this philosophy could transform your life. After all, how will you choose to live knowing that every breath is an opportunity to awaken